So tonight we're talking about the Immortal Hulk by Ewing and Joe Bennett and a few other guest fill-in artists. Um, Perhaps it's appropriate that today of all days we're talking about a character ruled by anger and rage, because I feel that that's an appropriate emotion at this moment in time. Um, so I'm just gonna call on people, and you can give your scores. I guess I will start. Um, I give it an 8.5. I really enjoy it. I think it's one of the best things that Marvel has produced in a very long time. Um, and also, I really enjoy books that sort of make me reevaluate a character or sort of refract a character in new and interesting ways, which I think this run does phenomenally. Um, Mike Prime, please proceed with your score.
Thank you, Patrick. I'll give the book a 8 out of 10. I have not been exposed to Hulk outside of the movies or the cartoon from the late 60s, early 70s, so don't really know a whole lot about the character and his supporting cast. But I found the exploration of the theme of anger and obsession to be really interesting. Overall, I thought it was just kind of like a standard superhero story or a horror story, but then it really got involved toward the end there, so it was excellent. So 8 out of 10. Do you want me to call in the next person, Patrick, or are you going to be holding the reins there?
Please proceed and elect a new speaker, Mike Prime.
Well, it looks like the friend squad is friendly with his cat, but that's about it over there. Oliver, would you like to go next?
Me and this boy, we ride or die, okay? So I think I enjoyed this book quite a bit. I am also a fake nerd boy who has no familiarity with the character outside of the films. But I thought this was really, really good. I enjoyed like them kind of like using his character as like a vehicle for body horror, which isn't something you generally see a lot of, but makes perfect sense. And I kind of liked all the twists and turns that went with it, and the fact that they weren't afraid to go in like some pretty dark places. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. So it's an 8 for me.
Oh, and before you pick the next person, I also just want to confess to being a fake nerdy nerd, because I actually have not had a lot of experience / exposure to Hulk either. So I would say that he's not in my wheelhouse as well. So
Sean.
My experience with the Hulk would be buying a low number version of the Hulk from a gas station when I was a kid and thinking it was going to be worth a lot of money. There was some bullshit reprint changing the name slightly, like the Majestic Hulk or some bullshit like that. So it was worth nothing. So that scarred me for life. But I would give it like an 8. I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. Carlos?
I really liked it. I'm going to give it an 8. I'll also admit that I didn't read the last 3 assigned issues, so I really hope it didn't jump the shark at the end there.
Carlos, you have not passed the vibe check.
is saying no. So I want to read on. I think it's really interesting because I don't know. I think the Hulk was sort of conceived as a horror character, but like quickly played more in like the disaster film like vein. Like he's sort of like a living disaster. And this is definitely a horror book that sort of plays on like the psychological elements that like really good horror does. And like he is unsettling. Like, I don't know, the Hulk is usually played like as, yeah, like a disaster film, but not like unsettling in the way of like deeply sort of distressing. And I think this sort of, pushed it in a new way to be like that. I'm going to call on Jolie.
Okay, I will give this a 7.8. We're going to give it room for that score to grow. Oh my God. I've never read The Hulk, and I'm really glad that I didn't allow other people's opinions on what comics I should read.
Like me.
No,
Sorry, go ahead.
actually, you know what? That's a lie. I did choose to pick up Planet Hulk in the early 2000s. When that was it released in the early 2000s, Planet Hulk? But anyway,
Mid, yeah.
It sounds about right.
yeah. So I did read that and I enjoyed it, but I really, really enjoyed this. Like I would give, compared to this, I would give Planet Hulk like a 5 out of 10, and I would give this like a 9 out of 10 if we had to compare just the two Hulk stories. But yeah, I honestly, because I'm so unread, not really well read on the Hulk, I didn't really know what to expect from a Hulk story. So I was pleasantly surprised when it had elements of horror, had like drama, but also had was able to still kind of rein in the whole superhero thing. So yeah, I'm going to jump to June.
Oh, Junior.
You're muted.
You're muted.
Good. That gives me time to give my score twice. I give it a 6. I enjoyed it. I really liked the horror elements, which I was not expecting to get. My experience with Hulk, I don't even know from where, but more comedic and more like disaster film, like Carla said. So I really enjoyed the horror elements there. I thought the daddy issues were really overplayed. I felt like the shading was not super up my alley. I didn't really like the color palette, which felt like it was trying to mesh too much into a broader universe and didn't really fit the story as well as I'd hoped. And I felt like they really tried to go hard on some themes that then they just didn't expound on. That I don't have the book in front of me. I haven't read it in a week or so I don't really even remember what they were because they didn't go into them. But I feel like some caretaking of the earth bullshit that like they kind of spun up a couple times and then just didn't do anything with. And I felt like it felt like the author wanted to do something, but the publisher was too cowardly to let it be written. And so it kind of fell flat in a couple regards for me. So I enjoyed it, but there were some things I really, really liked and then a few things I really didn't that kind of brought the whole thing down. Oh, I have to pick someone. I can't actually see people. Let's see. Michael, did you go?
Nope, not yet.
No. Go ahead.
Okay, I've read tons of Hulk, hundreds. I'm a huge fan of the old TV show. And so I give this at least an 8. I really was surprised how good it was. I do think the first few issues were probably better than the overall arc. Like, I wish they would have stuck more with the first few, which we can talk about later, because it seemed like they were just doing the TV show, but in the Marvel Universe. They even named, like, the reporter in the TV show was Mr. McGee, and this woman was Miss McGee, so same idea. But I think I agree that some of the concepts were a little bit too out there, and they didn't feel like either they weren't developed enough, or it felt like it's a kind of a trend now in comics where they try to make everything tie into something grander. And I have a feeling that if it kept going, it might be, what's the expression, too big for its britches. Like, I'm not sure how far they can go with this concept, but I did enjoy everything I saw. But I do wish it stayed a little bit more down to earth like it was in the first few issues. So yeah, at least an 8 out of 10. But the first few, I'd give a 9 out of 10. So, okay, let's see. Who hasn't gone yet? Keith, have you gone?
No, they just got there.
Oh, okay. Keith, do you want to wait?
All right, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
So, yeah. I'll give it a 7. Some parts I liked, and some parts I think were, underbaked, I think was said before. There's I've read Hulk, and I'm glad that they were able to come up with a new take on it that like a new explanation for him, because they're trying to do all these permutations where it's like he's smart and strong, he's dumb and strong. This is just like now he's like this demonic devil Hulk. So but some of the parts where it's just like some of the issues that I think as you say, they're trying to build something, tie it in. They're like reminding you about all the when all the other superheroes showed up. I don't think that part worked as well as the earlier and the later stuff, but yeah.
What about the art?
What?
What about the art?
I thought the art was fine. I wasn't enamored with it, but it was it definitely served. I mean, sometimes it'd be, what is it, like the guy who's ripped in half and running around, it's just his spine and his skull on top. I was like, that's a bit much, but all right. Lucy, you good to go?
Okay. I guess I'll scoot. I'll scoot for now.
Unless you want to be like shrouded in shadows and mystery.
Perhaps later. I really like the story a lot. This was the first Hulk issue I've read, but I've heard like more of the Hulk kind of mythos and backstory than you would have thought. And I was really happy with the comic. Like, it was a really strong story. It touched on a lot of different things that make up who the Hulk is. The art, I'm glad Juniper mentioned she wasn't happy with the coloring. That was my big complaint with the art. Like, I would have been absolutely thrilled if it was in black and white, because I felt like other aspects of the art were really strong, but the coloring made it kind of muddled. So if it was in a black and white format, I would have loved it so much more. Or black and white and green would have been fun too. I'd give the art probably like a 6, and the story like an 8. Who else hasn't gone?
I haven't gone yet.
All right, go Alex.
All right, I'll give this a 9 out of 10. I've really loved the Hulk since I was a kid. I thought this was a great version of him, and I love the combination of pulp and cosmic horror. I thought the story was great, and the artwork I thought was really good, especially with the Hulk himself. I thought he looked really monstrous and evil and good.
Yeah.
That it?
Is that everyone?
I think so.
It would appear so.
Yep.
So, do we want to talk about the actual book and the plot before we dive into these questions?
Well,
Sure.
can I just?
Patrick, I don't know. Yeah.
I was just going to briefly say, I thought this part of the art was awesome. Can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought that, like, to me, that's the old Jack Kirby Hulk, but with more realistic inking. And when they did that, it was amazing. I just wanted to point that out before we move forward. But anyway, we can talk about the plot now.
You can keep that screen up, because I sent him a screenshot of the exact same panel, but I had circled that vein.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the F is that?
Well, I mean, that's one minor thing. Yeah, I don't necessarily.
No, that's what happens to you when you get old. You get stuff like that. I got those in my legs.
Except for they're blue, and sometimes they're like puffy, and sometimes they're not. But no, like, I don't know. I think the artwork, everyone who said the coloring was terrible, I believe is correct. The coloring wasn't, it was not good. It was like someone had mentioned earlier, that it was coloring for Marvel. It wasn't coloring for like the genre or mood of the book. And I think that the inking, I feel like the artwork, this is one of those books where I always have a hard time kind of separating pencils from inks, because when the pencils and inks are good, you can't really tell the difference, because then the art is good. And then when the storytelling is good, you barely think about how bad the art is, because it's all married together. But for me, I feel like the inking is like the worst part of the art. If we're gonna go with like a hierarchy of worst things about the art, it's coloring, and then it's the inking. I feel like the inks are overworked and terrible.
Yeah, I felt like. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh.
I'm done.
Yeah, I felt like the inking was trying to go for a From Hell vibe, but like was not skilled enough to do it without just looking muddled.
Yeah. Too much.
In the beginning, and that's where you get that neck piece from the Hulk. In the beginning, it was really bad, but I feel like it really, like towards maybe the 6th or 7th issue, it really came together, and it made it like almost hard to read the book because it was so distracting. I will say though that my favorite thing about this whole entire run is the art in issue 3.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
They switch artists to 3 artists to tell 3 different stories.
Oh yeah, I love that too. That was
my favorite part.
Yeah, and I agree to Mike's point that it should be that's why I liked the first few stories before this sort of like existential theology arc started happening, is that you kind of get lost in these sort of one-off stories that, like in the intro, Jeff Lemire talks about, that they exist as single issues, but they also drive the Hulk's plot along. And like I really like that, and I didn't like it when it stopped happening.
I think the key moment was when the Avengers showed up. I was like, oh shit. Like I didn't want it to be that, because that's Planet Hulk, that's World War Hulk. It always goes back to them. They have to hunt him down and blah, blah, blah. And I wish they would have just kept it, because the thing with, like, has anyone here seen the old TV show? Raise your hand if you've seen the Bill. Anyone? Okay, Mike Prime. So it was The Fugitive, but with a Hulk, right? Every episode he's in a new town. No one knows who he is because he's using a clever pseudonym, like instead of David Banner, it's David Banyan. No one will ever know, right? But anyway, so he'll have like a new adventure with a new group of people, and by the end of the episode, he turns into the Hulk and kills the bad guys or hurts the bad guys and leaves. And at the first few issues, I was like, oh, that's what they're gonna do. But then as soon as they brought in the satellite and the gamma traces, it's like, oh, it's going to be a Marvel movie again. And unfortunately, it was still good at the end, but it became too large scale, I think. And I wish it was more like those first few issues, because it's hard to do a Hulk story in a day and age when there's satellites everywhere, there's facial recognition everywhere. Like, how are you supposed to do a story about a fugitive in this day and age? It's almost impossible. So I really liked it at the beginning, more so than the end.
I was okay because I think it's as close. I was okay with it because I think it's as close as you're going to get with this character. Like, I don't know, the Avengers, I mean, it was a big Avengers fight scene, but it also sort of played like a government agency in this.
Right.
And then when he was recaptured, it was like, it was sort of like recapturing Hannibal Lecter when Hannibal Lecter gets moved to his more spacious cell, right? It's sort of like it's part of the plan. It's not like that he's actually captured. It's something that I really liked about the story in general, and this is sort of a tangent, is that it's very much a take on the character where he's not out of control, where he's completely in control. And that is much more disturbing. That's like much scarier.
Yeah. I thought it was a nice philosophical take on the Hulk. And I normally don't like when like the Avengers just show up, but I felt like it fit in the story because they wanted to show all the different parts of the Hulk. It's like he's this monster, but also he has all these friends that care about him and all these people in his life. And like, I don't know, and just how like he has these different aspects of his personality that he's trying to make harmonious, but then there's like this part of him that has this despair, and like how he tried to kill himself, and how he's just let me die here. I thought it did a good job of touching on a lot of different things.
And just to go back to what Carlos was saying, like what I found so fascinating is yes, he's in control, but also not, because I think, and I confess, like I haven't read a lot of Hulk comics, but it seems like this is the first time where they sort of definitively established that, like, because I think before my impression of it is, even though when Bruce Banner was acting out, right, like there in some like fundamental way, like it was still him, but it was him like with his id unleashed or whatever. But here it's like no, like these are actually like different people, like these are different personalities, and like this is not Banner. Like they have some kind of, like Devil Hulk seems to have some kind of father, like surrogate father relationship to him, but that's not him. And like you said, like that is far more fascinating and also scary to me.
I just got to point out that idea was introduced in the 80s.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, like the multiple personalities was Peter David, I think. Like the Gray Hulk would have been one, then the Green Hulk and Bruce Banner were three. Then they merged to the Smart Hulk, and now they're kind of going further with it, I think.
So is the idea that this book is sort of like not a reboot, but a reimagining of the Hulk that involves pieces and elements from already existing like canon?
Yeah, they think so.
But it's not, yeah, but it definitely doesn't reboot any old stories. Like it incorporates a lot of the old, like it builds on everything by Peter David. It builds on Bill Mantlo. Bill Mantlo is the one that came up with the idea of his father beating him, and that's what started the trauma. So
it's just a new series.
Yeah, it's just a new series.
Okay.
I do.
Got it.
It also kind of recalibrates, because there was that whole World War Hulk, you know, like he ruled a whole planet, and now they're going back to stories that are much smaller. So I think there was a lot of recalibration of that aspect, because, you know, it's just like he was this interplanetary like warlord. Now he's back on Earth, just hanging out.
I mean, I do want to go back to something that Patrick said, because it is, I think it is much scarier, but like sort of for a slightly different reason. Like what I meant is that the Hulk side, like, isn't just pure id. But also, I don't know, like having known like a couple of people with like really extreme like mental illness, the parts of them that are like brutal or shitty or like manipulative, or yeah, like there are also, you know, like parts of them that are very kind and like thoughtful and considerate. So it's like, are those different people? Like, you know, is like somebody, and my old roommate who became like a disaster when he drank and was like a pretty extreme alcoholic, like, you know, when he was sober, is that a different person? I don't know. And I feel like in that way, it's sort of, I don't know, sometimes like there's a lot of like I feel like a lot of the Hulk is like dealing with your demons, and like this is like a version of it for when like people are not dealing with their demons. Like, and that, I don't like that. I feel like that sort of, you know, like when you have a protagonist, you want them to like struggle with the things, and like Bruce Banner is struggling, but like he ain't struggling very hard. Like when the nighttime comes, it's the Hulk's time, and the Hulk just gets to do what the Hulk wants.
Well, was there any type of character arc for the Hulk character? I mean, did he change from the beginning to the end?
I think we learned. I think the way that he at the end of the story, when he told Bruce Banner that he loved him because someone hacked or whatever. I've never seen that in any Hulk story. Like the whole idea is always that he hated Banner, puny Banner.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's an arc. I don't know, maybe not for this story, but it's almost like an arc for the whole series going back. You know.
So there's never been a story in the history of the Hulk where he is the Hulk is sort of Bruce's caretaker.
No,
not that I know of.
Not that I know of. Yeah, he seems to dread turning back into Banner because Banner's weak and all that stuff. So
yeah, or like Banner keeps him in a cage or whatever. Like that's what I'm used to. So when I read that, he's like, "Well, who else is going to take care of you? I love you." It's like
right. That was I had a tear in my eye. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
But that's like also an incredibly abusive relationship. Like,
yeah,
that part of it is like, oh, like, yeah, I was gonna take care of you, but I don't know.
That's what he was used to, like, growing up, though. I mean, there's that part where it's kind of mirroring the relationship he had with his father. Just like, yes, I'm very abusive, but I also love you. Like, I think that was a big part of the story arc. It's just him trying to work through the issues he had with his childhood. Like, that was a piece of it. And then there was also, like, the Jekyll and Hyde piece, too.
If Banner had done nothing and just been in the middle of nowhere, would the Hulk still have come out? Is that why he was going to the bars to find people so that he would have a legitimate target for the Hulk? Because it seemed to only come out when he was angry.
Like I think there was a panel where he was like, "Well, my new life goal is just to run around the place and seeking things that I can fix with my hulkiness."
So he was creating kindling for the fire of the Hulk. Like, I feel like he could have done more to repress that if he wanted.
The impression I got was that the Hulk was going to come out in the night, no matter what.
It's a very werewolfy kind of a situation.
Yeah, that's what he would. In the first few issues. That's how he turned into the Hulk at night. And then when Peter David did the Gray Hulk, they brought that back. So I guess it was a little bit confusing for me at first because I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so the Hulk is smart now, but is he still Bruce Banner? So it took me a while to catch up, but I guess that's what they were doing.
Okay, so what are the rules then, I guess? Like, because there's so many different, like, Hulk rules. What rules are we playing by in this book? Like, so the Hulk comes out at night, not just when he's angry or he's been made angry.
Mm-hmm.
What else should I be aware of?
I think that's the only difference.
Did he ever have a different origin? And by origin, I don't mean. Do you know what that's what I do mean. I'll explore the family thing later. But did he have a different origin, like him and the guy from Alpha Flight? Like, was that always a thing, where they're both gamma beings?
Sasquatch, right?
Yeah. I can't speak to the Sasquatch guy, but I think that's been true of Hulk for forever.
Yeah, like Hulk's origin that they showed is exactly how it was in 63 or whatever, 62. They just built on it and expanded it, but it's never changed. And then the thing about the Sasquatch, I didn't really know that he was irradiated by gamma, but I guess he was. Yeah, I have no idea. But I think this did a really good job of, like I said, expanding on everything, all these stories and tying them together a little bit more, a little bit better, you know? But it's all, as far as I know, it doesn't contradict anything.
And then one of the other key rules, I think this is new, hence the new sort of adjective in the title, like Banner can't die anymore, apparently, because even if you kill him, he just comes back, or the Hulk brings him back, which I think is new.
Disassemble him, he just can reassemble.
That was also my favorite part, him in all those jars.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw where it was going, because it's like, well, we'll keep all these jars in the same place.
Yeah, that was my...
Right? If I had those jars, I'd have one in New York and one in L.A.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that was so cool.
Yeah, I think that was my favorite series of issues there in the middle.
so gross.
I think like that's the thing. I think that's what's his name, Al Ewing. That's his way of kind of explaining, like, because it's funny because I just watched the movie Freddy versus Jason, right? And it's like, you know how Jason always comes back, and then eventually they're like, okay, we got to explain this somehow. So I think that's what Al Ewing is like. Okay, look, the Hulk keeps dying, coming back. So why don't we actually figure out a way to explain this? So I think, as far as I know, that's new. Like that idea is new. This idea that the Hulk can never die. Because yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
And also, the other new thing is that any other characters who sort of share that origin apparently can't die anymore either. So Leonard Samson keeps coming back, and it doesn't. We don't need a tortured explanation for that anymore because he just comes back. His cousin, She-Hulk, also falls under that same rubric, which this writer's going to do a She-Hulk title in the similar vein very soon, which I'm excited about. So she can't die anymore either. So,
isn't She-Hulk just normal? Because that was something that confused me. Isn't she just like she's like
normal,
green and buff? But in this one, she like goes crazy.
Yeah, I think I think she changed within the last 2 years, and now she's sad.
Yeah, there was a whole crossover we don't need to worry about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just say that like she's not in a good mental headspace at the moment.
Also, now people can like vampire away other people's gamma radiation, and it seems like go back and forth at some points.
I think that's new too. Like,
yeah,
I've never seen that before.
My interpretation
is the name of my math rock band.
My interpretation of it is that like it's sort of to make it make sense that the Hulk doesn't die vaguely. Like it's sort of like been taken out of like science fiction. Like there are clear rules that we're playing with here, and like pulled it more into weird horror. Like the gamma radiation or the gamma bomb like did something that, you know, like humans weren't supposed to do, and it opened like this green door that released this like basically this supernatural force, and that's like why the Hulk can't die. It doesn't have anything to do with gamma radiation. It has to do with like now the Hulk is in like our world.
There's definitely like there's like an esotericism in this book that you don't really get from the Hulk a whole lot, at least not as far as I'm aware. It always seemed like he was a little more conventional.
I will say I love that development because I like it. It's one of our discussion questions. Where like this notion of dying in comics is just so ridiculous now. It's just whenever they announce something like that, I'm always like, but why? Like it's so inconsequential and it doesn't really matter because they'll be back fairly soon. Mm-hmm. And so like, why not take that concept and like do something interesting with it? Just sort of do away with like all of these tortured ways to bring characters back, which we'll see in a big way when we do that X-Men title next year. But I think it's really, I like it. I just like saying like, fuck it, you know, he's going to come back. So we're just going to say that he just keeps coming back.
Hey, Patrick, there was a book that we did in book club years ago called Day Tripper by Gabriel Ba.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole conceit of the story is that this one regular person dies, and then all of a sudden the next chapter starts, and then he dies a different way. And then the next chapter starts, and he's a little older, and he dies a different way. And it just kind of like explores the idea of death, really, in multiple different ways. And that's one of the things I liked about this story is that it's like, how many times did the Hulk die in 13 issues? I lost count. Like
every other issue, I think he
and it's just like, oh, it's just like he just died again, and oh, here's a different interesting way to die, and how does it affect these other people? And it didn't bother me at all, and I guess I've gotten used to the idea that comic books are just, that just doesn't mean a different thing, or it means a different thing in comic books. It's just more symbolic. It's not to be taken literally. I mean, that's how I think of it now.
Yeah, it's a way for them to like goose the sales if something's flagging.
Well, then there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like they'll never stop and they'll never end the usage of it until they recognize that introducing things like the Hulk being immortal is the way to change that. It's like introduce something about the character that works, and then that's your new death plot. I mean, don't make everybody immortal.
Right.
X-Men, the vampires. Are we pretending that didn't exist?
So what doesn't exist?
The Marvel. I think was it only the X-Men that became vampires?
Well, vampires have been around in Marvel for a while. Unfortunately, it doesn't really mix, but
no, I'm speaking specifically to X-Men vampires.
Jubilee was a vampire for like a
one.
long time.
Okay, did they erase that? I'm just asking.
She is currently not a vampire.
Okay, cool. So that's how you introduce that's how you shoehorn in something that's popular to drive sales, and it doesn't work. But you introduce something like making the Hulk immortal, and that's something that I would like as somebody who collects stories that are good for my bookshelf. This is a book that I would collect to put on the bookshelf, because that's cool. Not like zombies or
right
vampires.
What about did you guys like the biblical, the allusions, and like that's where I think I'm not saying it went too far, but I guess my question is how far can they go with that idea? Because I've been reading a lot of comics in the last few years, like for example Hawkman, where it's like now Hawkman's origin is tied into like every dimension, all timelines, and it's like sometimes they take these characters, or like for example Swamp Thing, we find out Swamp Thing is an elemental, and then we find out Firestorm is a fire elemental, and Animal Man is an elemental, and it's almost like they take all these concepts to the nth degree. And I haven't read the rest of the series, but I wonder how far they can go with this idea.
Okay, so it's still ongoing, and I don't want to spoil things.
Okay.
But I will say that I think they pay off that sort of grand cosmic stuff in a very down-to-earth way.
Okay.
So that's all I'll say, because I don't want to spoil it.
I definitely and I don't want to get into the specifics, but I definitely like the allusions. Is that the right word with an A? Allusions to the mythology in the Bible. I thought that was cool. Definitely. Like, they starting off every comic with a quote from whoever, Jung or Nietzsche or Shakespeare is always a great way to start a comic, right?
Well, okay, I have something to say about that, because I'm trying to find it now actually, but it's the quote from William Blake about a lamb. Does anyone? Okay, I'm on issue 5. Yeah. It's not 5, but like
it's from the tiger. But
there are 2 people who have used that quote in their books in recent memory, and one is Al Ewing, and the other is Stephanie Meyer.
Uh-oh.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
Where did she use it?
She used it she used it as a very literal thing, as in like that's something Edward would say to Bella, because he is clearly the lion because he's a monster, and she is the lamb because he wants to eat her. Like, and I kind of laughed a little bit because that's like an irresponsible way to use that quote, whereas here it was. I say irresponsible. I kind of love it, but hashtag Team Edward. I really, I thought it was, other than reminding me of Twilight, I was like, oh, that's a horrifying thought in this book when you think about it in the context of this Hulk series. So I just wanted to bring that up. I just thought it was hilarious that it was Al Ewing, but also Stephanie Myers.
Look, sometimes you just be horny for monsters, okay?
Yeah, and like honestly, William Blake must speak to a wide variety of authors. So,
I mean, I did. So there's in folklore, because like the devil doesn't like play prominently in the Bible, but like plays really prominently in folklore and like sort of like later mythology, like with Milton and stuff. And there's sort of like 2 ways to look at the devil, like that the devil is like the adversary of God and like must be destroyed, and like, the sort of almost evangelical way. In a lot of folklores worldwide, and like sort of interesting for this book, like in like folklores specifically from New Mexico, like the devil is like the agent of God, is like sort of the avenging force against sinners, and that's sort of like the devil that like drags you to hell more or less after you fucked up, is not like trying to tempt you. And I think like this Hulk sort of like taps into like that like devil like myth cycle or like folkloric tendency. Like like this Hulk isn't like, you know, like trying to make people be more evil, but like is like punishing evildoers like almost to like evil and like whatever that means, but like punishing people to like almost like an nth degree, like ripping off the limbs of that one character and burying him like underneath
That's great.
is like, but yeah, that's like sort of like classical hell like conceptions, and also like the devil as like sort of avenging agent of justice or of God, or like however like
or that bartender who wouldn't let him use the bathroom.
Yeah.
Building off of what Carla said, I think that was a very interesting point you made. And I just wanted to build off of that and say, I heard, I don't know how true it is, but I thought it was very interesting that one of the main criticisms of Paradise Lost is how sympathetic he made the devil in his book and how he made him this tragic figure. And I think that ties really well into like how Hulk is portrayed as this tragic figure a lot of the times in the comic books, and how he's almost like this like he is trying to be an agent of revenge and to punish sinners in a very similar way. So yeah, I definitely can see the parallels there.
There was I can't remember where I heard this. I think I was watching a video or something where it was talking about like superheroes and how there's this need to see superheroes wield power and to use it against others, but they need to do so reluctantly because we want to see them be violent, but we need to know that violence is justified. So I feel like in the context of Hulk, you have this guy who goes into this rage, gets huge, and does all this smashing around, and it's kind of treated as this sort of like he's this like evil monster who is situationally useful, whereas this comic kind of like reframes him as this sort of like instrument of like righteous anger, which I think is kind of a really interesting way to view him. I don't know. And
I know June mentioned this earlier, like Ewing drops this notion of like that concept of the Hulk punishing evildoers sort of in this much wider context. And again, not to spoil anything, like that's something it's the curse of like this thing called an ongoing comic. Like, so we can't possibly cover, well, maybe we can, like all the story that's there, but that's a thread that he picks up later on that proves to be interesting.
I also just like want to jump off of what Oliver was saying in that, yeah, like this sort of flips it, because like the Hulk Banner is reluctant, the Hulk is not reluctant, and that's also like I think what makes it like frequently not reluctant. Like when he shows up to like punish the dude in the first issue, like there's this feeling that he sort of is enjoying what he is doing, and I think that's that's what makes it, and it gets played like that. That's what makes it like distressing. Like I think that's where a lot of the horror comes from.
That he gleefully punishes the evildoer.
Yeah.
One theme that I kind of thought was interesting, and I don't know if anyone else picked up on this. But I think there's this theme that I noticed kind of surrounding bodies, and I don't think they explored it quite as thoroughly as they could have. But I feel like there's this reoccurring theme around like the interaction that people have with their own bodies, and this idea of the body as being something that is both malleable and changing and impermanent, but it's also something that you can be trapped inside of. And I think like there's like a very specific reason why they chose Bushwhacker as like one of the villains in the story, is because, you know, he does have that like kind of malleability to his own body. Same thing with Crusher Creel. And like I said, I don't think they went into it as deeply as they could have, but I feel like there's like a seed of something in there.
I think it's funny that you mentioned, like, you basically mentioned body horror. And
Yeah.
there's like a shout out to The Fly on one of the pages. And I thought that was great. I was like, yeah, it is very Cronenberg-y.
Yeah, no, I do think it's really interesting, and subtle themes are really interesting to me because like you have to sort of pick them apart more. But a lot of the focus is sort of, I mean, especially with the Hulk, is sort of like horror with your relationship with your own mind. But there is another part of it here that's sort of horror with one's relationship with their own body.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't know, that has a lot of like different threads that can be pulled apart.
Yeah, I found it especially horrifying toward the end there where he lost all that body weight and it was nothing but like flaps and flabby skin just kind of like hanging off of him.
Mm-hmm.
I always think it's like, wow, if I ever got around to losing that 20 pounds I want to, it's just going to be ugly.
Mike, just an aside, can you let Sean back in?
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say we lost.
Sounds like Erica, right? Let me in! Let me in!
No, Oliver, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I think we also see that in that scene I think it's in issue 11 where the reporter was like questioning him and like asking him like, why do you get to be angry and why does your anger get to be justified and legitimated, whereas mine is sort of suspect and dangerous, but just by virtue of them existing in these two different kinds of bodies, which I thought that was really fascinating.
Well, I think there's more to be said about that too, and that she's like a woman of color.
Right.
It's especially not okay for her to be angry for like those 2 layers, which is interesting. And she just wanted to be able to feel angry and to be okay.
Right.
Like I definitely feel that feel. I'm like, I want to be able to express anger and it to be okay. Like it's okay to be mad. It just depends on how you're reacting to it. And I think that has a lot to do with how the Hulk is like, well, I'm going to get mad anyway. I'm going to try to channel it into something good.
No, but I love his response too, which is like, no, yeah, that's good.
I love that too. That was like one of my favorite parts. I was like, "Aw, thanks, Hulk."
Supportive Hulk.
Yeah.
I think that was like a big part of it, because like it's no longer he gets angry and stupid. It's like, I don't know. Now he gets angry, like you know, why is he still able to like rage out? It's like, oh, because he's able to focus it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a good part because I think like it's kind of like summed up what it had been building up to. Like, you know, if it's not, he gets angry and then he smashes things. You know, what is it? Yeah, I mean, there's lots of really strong characters, like physically powerful characters throughout the Marvel universe. Like, why does this need to be a Hulk story? Like, lots of characters can smash things. So
He has like his own thing though, and I like that they really played that up here.
Well, I think there's like a question as well that kind of like that touches on what Keith just said and that Patrick just wrote, and it's the one about gothic horror, where they seem to be writing the Hulk as a gothic horror character, and maybe that's what sort of sets him apart from all of the other like smashers, because you see a smasher in this one, and that's Iron Man, right? He's in his Hulkbuster suit, and he's powerful. Tony Stark is powerful when he's in his suit, but his anger is different from the Hulk's, right? So it's like, but this one, I don't know. I feel like I associate the anger to a more monstrous personality, and I always have, and I don't know if that's changed after having read that. I don't know if anyone wants to elaborate. I don't read a lot of gothic horror, maybe. So I can't really speak to that part of it, but I really want to explore kind of maybe that question. If anyone else wants to.
I just thought it was cool, but I can't elaborate. I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't read much gothic. Well, I've read like Jekyll and Hyde, Dracula, Frankenstein.
I would say that's a good start.
It reminds me of my favorite Gothic horror, Twilight.
Well, the thing is, I actually know. I wanted to say I haven't read any Lovecraft, but this seemed very Lovecraftian. Like from what I understand, Lovecraftians. I mean, like the whole idea of like this under dimension with creatures that come through and blah blah blah. That's everything I've ever heard about Lovecraft, right?
Yeah, it was very cosmic horror-y.
Right.
It was a nice fusion of that gothic horror and cosmic horror.
So is that?
Go ahead, Jolie.
What I was gonna say is that like what the whole like green door thing is supposed to be then?
Yeah, that's a new idea.
Like I honestly that just because I was rushing to read, I feel like that concept flew right over my head. If anyone wants to, spend a little time on that one, I'll listen.
So it's the setup seems to be, and I think this is a new concept for the mythos as a whole, is like when he exploded that bomb like decades ago, like it opened that portal to somewhere or something, which I guess no one realized until now, before Al Ewing sort of took the concept and ran with it. Like he opened that door and this thing has been there pulling the strings, but now we're only finding out and sort of exploring what that means.
Yeah, the impression I got was that pretty much any really, really intense gamma burst will access that universe or that world or whatever, because when Sasquatch gained his powers through gamma burst, it was also through a creature coming through the green door. And that's like the shift from Hulk as science fiction to Hulk as cosmic horror.
Okay.
Well, I also thought it was a great idea to show that Bruce Banner is the scientist, the smart one, but the Hulk has the intuition and like thinks. Well, how did they word it? They kept saying he thinks magically. I don't know. I thought that was kind of cool because, like, if you really get into myth, like this guy Al Ewing must be really well read, because it's almost like reading the Vision, where it's like he threw everything into the kitchen sink. Like every concept he's been reading, he tried to incorporate into the story. I thought that was really cool. It's the cool way of looking at the Hulk,
I don't know. So yes, I think that's right. To go back to what Jolie was talking about, Gothic horror doesn't base a lot of its horror in anger, other than Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. A lot of the Gothic horror figures are very much in control of themselves. And that's sort of where a lot of that, I don't know, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, even Edgar Allan Poe's characters, the horror doesn't come from being out of control. The horror comes from being very much in control. Even the Telltale Heart, Homeboy is like deeply disturbed, but he knows
Yeah, a little
exactly
bit.
what he's doing.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I think the in both sort of like a nerdy comic book way, but also sort of a thematic way, the fight between She-Hulk and the Hulk in this is really interesting because like he doesn't win by overpowering her.
Oh yeah,
Like,
she whispers something in her ear.
yeah, no,
Right?
he like says like you are like me, and then like that is what is terrifying. Like, is like that's what causes her to stop.
Yeah, because she's under probably the same impression as me, where she just thinks that this affliction comes on when she gets angry. And that's very cut and dry for her. It's like angry, not angry. Angry, not angry. She-Hulk, Jennifer. Jennifer?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, Jennifer
Yeah.
Walters.
Jennifer.
Yeah, so it's like to have that introduced to her by another creature who is like her, so she maybe assumes that they think the same way. It's like terrifying. It's very like Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, except for Mr. Hyde is like a super genius.
Who loves you?
Yeah,
Who
who
loves you?
and will protect your weak self. Like, I just the other thing that I thought was so smart and calculating was that they wrote like the Mr. Hyde part of him in this way, as not being just a complete monster, is that when he was broken up into bits, he somehow was able to, even though he couldn't speak to them, to get them to reveal their research in front of him so that he could break out of those containers.
Freaking awesome.
Like,
Well, there's this moment in the comic where Bruce says he's smarter than I am. He just like is like he just operates on like intuition, and I kind of like that idea of like the Hulk is smart. He's just smart in like a different way than Bruce is.
Yeah, he's street smart. Homeboy is street.
There's also sort of this weird back and forth thing that is kind of interesting to me, and just like once again in like a nerdy way. If we're talking about like the Jekyll and Hyde part of it, like the Hulk was like partly inspired by Jekyll and Hyde, but then like when you go back into comics, like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Jekyll and Hyde is very much like inspired by the Hulk, and then this Hulk has the feeling of being like taken sort of from the Mr. Hyde that's in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, because that Mr. Hyde is like very similarly like a sociopath, but like very calculating
and very compelling.
Yes.
And if I recall correctly, like he has a very similar relationship with Mina in that series, because I think he like brutally murdered the Invisible Guy.
Yep.
For raping her, which he deserves because he's a jackass. But and I think Ewing is from Britain, so I would not be at all surprised if he's an Alan Moore aficionado. So
yes.
So Carlos, what you're saying is that modern pop culture is an Ouroboros that is constantly eating itself.
Yep.
Not so many words. Okay. All right.
I'm just flipping around the issues here because I just want to see.
I'm just looking at these questions.
I know there was questions.
I also want to mention how, because I think a book is only as successful with how you're good with your supporting characters. And I think Ewing populated the book with a lot of really interesting supporting characters, and I think he found a way to use, like Alpha Flight, some like whatever, in some really interesting ways. And I think Marvel, they're really doing a lot of stuff with that Absorbing Man and Titania character, and they're sort of written as like this very Bonnie and Clyde-ish couple in the last few years, which he leans into here, which I really appreciated.
tragically underused. Hulk mouth.
Oh, poor Derek.
It was so
bad
cute.
for Derek. Yeah.
It was so cute.
So is
Derek.
Is Derek part of the
Derek.
continuity?
Derek is
Like
immortal
2
now.
seconds.
Derek's been there
Oh,
since
that's
the
true.
beginning.
That's true.
Exactly, right?
Now I feel better. We're gonna see Derek again. That's nice.
Should write a letter.
Yeah.
We should all write a letter.
Oh, okay. So I guess I have another question. So it was introduced by Peter David, the whole familial backstory of the Hulk,
Yes.
where his father is abusive to him and blames Bruce for the decay of his marriage.
It started with Bill Mantlo, but then Peter David expanded on it.
Okay, so yeah. So that, and then that's just been accepted as canon. Like that's, so how was that his father that he was seeing?
Patrick, you might know because you read ahead, but you shouldn't spoil it, right?
I'm not gonna spoil it for you.
Oh, okay. Because I feel like I get the feeling that it maybe not. Maybe it is.
Believe what you want, Jolie.
Okay.
Believe what you want.
Well, I'm going to keep reading. I just want to shout out a friend of ours. Well, I mean, of mine at least, is taking over the art. With issue 46. Yeah.
Who's this?
Of this book?
Adam Gorham.
You're friends with Adam? He's so cool. I love his stuff. Anyway, I'm sorry. Yeah, I have a piece from him.
He's so quiet and nice, right?
Right? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We had a moment there. We're moving on. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if we ever get to go to conventions again, definitely approach him. He may seem like he doesn't want to talk to you, but that's just because he doesn't speak loudly, or he's like one of those very humble, thankful artists. Not.
Aw.
He's not a groomer like the rest of them.
Yeah, we saw him. I met him at C2E2 last February. Just
Yeah.
the last show of the year. So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so he just announced on his Facebook page that he's taking over the art. But anyway, or he's at least doing an issue.
Anyway, to your point, or to your question, Julie, about that creature being Banner's father, I'm glad Patrick said that there's more to it, because that was one of the big things I didn't like. Was to me, they made very clear that it was a being that took on the guise of Banner's father, and then it seemed like it was played too much as actually his father. So that was like a whole story arc that didn't work for me. So I'm glad that maybe it gets resolved.
Okay, good. Yeah, I feel like in asking, I was looking for confirmation. Like, did anyone else get the feeling that, because it shows up, he's inside Sasquatch. So it's like, how would Banner's father know Sasquatch to get inside there? And then he would have to then know that he would absorb all the radiation from Sasquatch, and then thus, absorbing his father. So I thought I maybe had missed something and it wasn't a being, but thank you for clearing that up.
Or
the
not
impression I
clearing
got
it
was
up,
that
which is my intent. So.
Oh, so just dropping clue bombs.
Because I don't want to spoil it for you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, June. I interrupted.
No, I didn't have anything important to say.
Well, did anybody like the fact they brought back Rick Jones as a zombie?
Who's Rick Jones?
What's his backstory?
He's the sidekick who he basically sort of catalyzed the whole thing, because Banner wouldn't have gone out to be irradiated had he not been out in the field to be rescued. And so Rick is sort of instrumental into turning him into the Hulk.
So yeah, Rick Jones used to hang out with the Hulk.
The Avengers too.
And then he hung out with the Avengers, and then he became Bucky, and then he just played guitar for a few years. Then he became Captain Marvel's partner. Like, he's been around forever, but he's always been kind of an asshole. Like, not an asshole, but in my opinion, he's always been kind of like, he's like the Wesley Crusher of Marvel, because he's
a groupie. He's a superhero groupie.
Right.
Okay.
He's always around.
It was like Wesley Crusher is not a groupie. This guy sounds like a total groupie.
He's just like. Well, I guess
Oh, Wesley is such a groupie.
he's not
He is
like
such a
Wesley, but he's
groupie.
as hated as Wesley. You know,
Mm.
he's always around. He's like the smart ass. He plays guitar. He's got long hair.
He wears awful sweaters.
Yeah.
Well, at this point in the Hulk story, is he dead?
Yeah.
And okay, so he died previously to the issue starting that we read, and then he appears as like a zombie character or life after death or something.
Right.
In that
Yeah, I
place,
thought he had kind of an outsized role for not giving him backstory. I was really lost on who he was throughout the whole thing. And like similarly, I was a little bit lost on like why there were like they kept talking about like Red Hulks and other Hulks, and I'm like, oh, I can't keep track of all this. I don't know.
I think it's
So
best. Yeah, the less said about that is the better. But anyway. Go
yeah,
ahead, Fred.
but like I wish they just hadn't said anything, right?
Right,
Because it
I
just like
agree.
introduced information that then was like, I'm like, do I need to keep track of this or like do I not because I've not read any Hulk books? But like they put it in there so it was given importance, but then never expanded on. I felt like Rich like those were like small, and so I was kind of like, okay, I can get over them, as annoying as they were. But like Rick Jones was very like, okay, he has like this thread through several of the issues, but I have no context for who he is and why he's important to the Hulk.
It kind of makes me.
The book does kind of like assume that you have like a lot of familiarity with like the Hulk mythos, and it has all these like characters from his history, most of whom I was not really familiar with. Like I only knew Betty Ross because I was like, oh, that's Liv Tyler, and I knew the general guy because he's like the bad guy in every Hulk movie.
excuse me, Betty Ross is Jennifer Connelly. Thank you. So,
I stand corrected.
Thank you, Patrick.
thank you.
Also,
She may be the inferior Betty, but she's mad if she knew you said Liv Tyler's name first.
That's right. That's right.
I think like one of the things I liked about the series when it first started was that it was like very much a reset because this character has gotten so out of control, and it's like, we're just gonna have like he's traveling in the West and solving individual problems, and then it's like, no, we kind of have to address like he did almost destroy the planet and enslaved a bunch of people and did all this stuff, and it's like I wish that they had just wipe that clean and no Red Hulks and no other Hulks and no all this stuff. Yeah, I was like,
what's the deal with all these Hulks?
Yeah, bringing all that stuff in, I was like, I get like there will be people who will be angry if you don't say this, but at the same time, you're leaving all of us who do not have 30 years of Hulk history, or 50 years now, actually. So it's like, and it's very much like resetting from, he's not like, conquering planets at this point. So why, I don't know. I feel like of all the options they had, this was probably, all the solutions, this is probably the poorest. But I wish they had just wiped it clean and just gone on, but like rebooted it.
No, I just want to quickly point out for those that don't know, this is Rick Jones. Can you see? This asshole right here is Rick Jones. Okay?
That image is so 90s. It's so 90s.
I love him.
It's painfully 90s.
I would be one of those women hanging on him in the red.
Mm.
There you go.
It's also, I mean, the Hulk in there is just like a reminder, like how much like these characters change as they move, because like it's hanging out in fucking shorts and.
Oh yeah, this was like when the Hulk was green but also smart, but not like he only was the Hulk. He didn't turn back into Bruce Banner, and I actually found this version really boring. So I'm glad they went back.
Yeah. The only thing that this picture makes me long for is high-waisted jeans and crop tops. Like, can they start drawing those now that they're back in style? Can they start drawing those back into comics, please? Like,
1 sec.
that was
We're
amazing.
gonna sign a petition and send it to Marvel Bring back high-waisted jeans and crop tops.
Call your friend.
Julie,
Yeah.
weren't you just talking about how your friend is drawing comics?
Yeah.
There
Well, I
you
mean,
go.
I think between Patrick's Patrick and we know enough artists that we have some swingy pull. Maybe.
I mean, I still have to pay them money for their art, so I think that I don't have that much sweeney pull.
I love that you two are like our comic book industry insiders in this group.
Money talks.
That's I think that's overstating things, Oliver.
So we need
Heidi.
to start a crop top and high-waisted short GoFundMe? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, sure.
Why not?
I'll try to work that in my
Miguel,
next
you're muted.
mission.
But talking.
Crop top shorts or whatever.
My favorite part about that picture is how nobody needs a face mask.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Well, maybe they're in the same social bubble.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
There you go.
They seem
Like-
very close, like the friend squad over there.
It's
Rick
their
and the Hulk.
quarantine.
Yeah, they're for sure part of the same. I like that. They're part of the same quarantine.
Mm.
I mean, they definitely kind of look like they're all in a polycule. So
I
All right.
mean, if Banner dies of COVID, apparently he still comes back as the Hulk. So
It's all good. Maybe we can harvest some antibodies as well.
There you
Oh
go.
god,
Yeah.
but they're all
So-
radioactive antibodies.
Oh, that's a fan fiction waiting to happen.
Yeah. Ooh, question. Okay, number 8 on our question list. Let's get back on track here. I'm sorry, I've been distracted by crop tops and high-waisted pants. General 14, the question is he a bad guy? I don't even know which character that is.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's the bigwig guy in the base who's all like, I must kill the Hulk.
Anyone want to point him out?
He's the
Where
leader
is
of
he?
the leader of the dastardly evil base.
Yeah, he's the boss of the evil scientist, but like an underling of someone else who passed off Hulk for he recused himself from Hulk duties.
Oh.
He's the only person with a square jaw that's not on the Avengers.
Right. You see him in issue 6
Issue 6.
he gives that really like assholey, like authoritarian.
of this page. Oh, you can't see it because of my background.
Oh,
It's there.
oh my goodness. Okay.
But yeah, it was like, oh, I'm going to fire this person for even questioning orders, and they're going to have all this surgery to make them a janitor. I was like, this is a lot. This is our tax dollars at work.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Okay, I thought.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, unless it's to the whole janitor point, then we should continue with that thought.
All right.
I was just gonna ask, like, for people who like read comics, because I've never read a single comic in my life. What's going on with those like freaky like people with like the tubes going into their eyes?
They're psionic spies.
Okay, they were fucking cool. I wanted more of them.
Yeah, do they show up in the Marvel mythos a lot? Because that seems like a whole background story somewhere.
Like
Yeah, they put them in there like we should have known who they were.
I think they're just extras, like just sort of like a general, like, ooh, General 14 has all of these resources, and look, he can have psychic spies, and look, he's unstable enough that he'll just be like, now you're a janitor.
Okay. I just want to say, get you a girl. Damn, it's gone. Get you a girl that looks at you the way Hulk looks at Mike Prime. That was hilarious. The way that
You like that one?
Yeah, that was good. That was good. 'Cause-
There. He's with a puppy. See? He's got a little Hulk puppy.
Oh,
okay, so another thing that we haven't. Another person. You're muted, Mike.
I took that idea of those guys hanging upside down. As far as I know, that's a brand new idea.
Is it?
And because I haven't read a Hulk comic in 10 years, and I was like, oh, cool. Because I felt like if you're watching like an HBO show and they throw in one of those things, you kind of just go, I'm sure they'll get back to that later. So as far as I know, Patrick, like you read ahead, does that come back?
like the whole psychic spice
Like
thing?
those guys hanging upside down with the tubes in them? Does that come
No,
back?
to me, they just seem like set dressing. Like, I don't think they that set of characters or that concept comes back to serve any other important part of the plot other than like here's some set dressing, like look how many resources we have.
Ewing must have just watched Minority Report.
Right, or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just so graphically distinct and quasi well realized. It feels weird to have it as like just a couple panels.
Okay. Awesome. One last question from me. So McGee, like the reporter, who is gender swapped for this book, cool. But from the television show, I should say. Could you have read this story without her?
No, I think she's essential. Like,
I feel like you know something we don't. Okay.
No, but even in these sets of issues, I think she needs to be there because I think she serves that important sort of like reader perspective, particularly like you've never read Hulk before. Here's an entry into the world, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say that she's the audience stand-in to get us in those first 3 issues or however many she's in.
And if she's not there,
she's kind of the one link tying them all together, other than the Hulk,
right?
Who is still like kind of at a distance and as a mystery. So she's the one thing kind of bridging those issues.
Yeah, because they introduce her as someone who, this is her relationship to the Hulk. He destroyed her town,
her life.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah, but then they didn't, and that was it. Then she became somebody who groupied him or followed him around for a story, or followed other people to find him to get the story. And then they kind of just put her in hell with the rest of Alpha Flight Gamma Flight. And then she sees her dad and there's nothing there. Like you see a visualization of an illustration of her crying, but like it didn't touch the points that I thought it should. She saw a shell of her dead father. Like that's freaky.
Yeah, I honestly forgot that she was in the entire arc. I only remembered her in the beginning and a little bit with Gamma Flight.
Yeah, so I like what they did with her in the beginning, and that there's backstory that involves her, or at least that character's name from the television show into here, and I like that. But it's like, they kind of just glossed over her when they all went to hell.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'll give it 8 out of 10, and thank you, Patrick, for this pick because it was actually one of my favorites of the past year or so. So, and it proves that you can have good discussions about superhero comics, right, guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Maybe we should go around again now.
Carlos was saying something before.
Carlos.
I don't know. So I still really like this book, but I think it's one of the ways in which it sort of stumbles. Like I think June is also right that the dad stuff is sort of hacky. Like it's a way to get at something without like using, like a really tired Freudian trope, right? But yeah, no, it seems like they keep like trying to stutter step into doing something interesting with McGee, and it just never comes together. Like the idea of like, how do I become you, and like sort of like that weird identification with something that like destroyed your life. Like that's interesting and like something that was not explored at all.
I mean, at the end of the day, like Marvel can take their characters and like do interesting things with them. At the end of the day, it is corporate art, and you're only going to get so far with corporate art.
I don't agree with that assessment though of this book, because if it was corporate, half of the stuff wouldn't have been included. I'm just going to go out there and say that.
Though it's still technically that though. Though I think I agree with Jolie more. But I
disagree that corporate art can't be boundary pushing.
Correct. I also disagree with the point that it can't. Yeah, I agree with June.
Wayne from G7 Think You.
Sorry, what, Sean? Say it again.
That was an echo. Let me just mute that.
He has not turned into an echo. So yeah.
Can I be become you.
And to Oliver's point, I think that there is a certain amount of like within respected IPs, a lot of people aren't given a lot of rope to hang themselves with, and I feel like that might have been that's certainly an argument to make with some books. I don't know that. I feel like that is an issue in some aspects of this book, certainly, with like the color palette, for example, where I'm like, I wish the artist had just been like, fuck you, we're going to do black and green and red or whatever, make it a Christmas story. But yeah, there was that corporate hold in to tie it into the Avengers more. And so I think Oliver has a point there.
I just wanted to backtrack when we were saying how McGee was this integral part of the comic, but also how she wasn't as fleshed out as she could have been. I kind of think it would have been interesting if they would have just had a one shot of just her. I know it wouldn't have sold very well, but I think it would have been an interesting way to give her a backstory without taking too much of, like, to just have like her own little thing.
Yeah, or even like they had that issue with 3 stories. I think it would have been interesting to like splice in more of her story and give her like a five dedicated pages or something. She was a really compelling character to me. Her interaction with the Hulk was really interesting.
So there's definitely a lot more they could have done to expand her backstory. Like, there's a ton more they could have done. Just kind of planted seeds and just never followed through.
Yeah. And also, speaking of seeds that they don't follow through on, or maybe they didn't, I missed it, but remember the 2 guys in the bar and someone, they're like...
They got real angry. Yeah.
Yeah, they got angry when Sabretooth was around, or Hulk, or somebody. But they never really followed up on that either. Or were they insinuating that... Because they also talked about that boy who they dug up, or they exhumed and he was living. So are they insinuating that everyone that lives in this town is affected by gamma radiation?
I think the implication, and I agree they didn't really, follow up or flesh it out. I think the implication was that like the devil dad was like exerting this like influence on people and like driving them crazy and making them violent. But yeah, I think you're right. They didn't really do a whole lot with it.
Yeah, I went back and I was like, I guess it's the devil dad, but I was like, did I miss something? I reread that part because I had the same question. I was like, well, I guess they'll explain this later. And then, I finished the issue. I was like, I guess maybe they didn't. Like, I reread it. I was like, did I miss one line? And no, that was, I was like, I was like, well, I guess I'll just read into this that Devil Dad did it, but it's never explicitly said.
Do you think maybe there was a lot of things that got on the cutting room floor for this comic because it did have to, like, I assume like most comics it had to be a minimum page requirement, and they maybe had to cut a bunch of stuff that shouldn't have been cut.
Okay, cool. Sorry, Patrick, I'm just looking through your questions, and in one way or another, it looks like we've touched on most of
I think so.
Here. Unless you can think of anything else, or if anyone else wants to talk about anything else.
The only thing I would mention is that it's very similar in story to Stephen King's The Revival, but I assume no one's read that.
No. Sorry.
Strange electricity that someone discovers that allows them to open a door to another world, or the like afterlife, and there's an evil entity that wants to come through the dead. It's very Lovecrafty. It's called, her name is Mother. Mother wants to come through. It's very weird.
Well, it's also the plot of Doom, because they discover energy.
Hell,
Stranger Things too.
Huh.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was like, it's like, oh, gamma radiation, well, can't explain it, so it must be a gateway to hell. So was just like,
Yeah,
Thank you.
I find the gateway to hell trope really incredibly overplayed as of 2020. So that I was on board with the cosmic horror of the Green Door, but when it was like, all right, we're all in hell now, I'm like, ugh, why?
Yeah. It's like,
Oh, okay,
is it
there's
overplayed or is it too close to home?
I don't know. Like kind of this a way like, oh, country bumpkins just assume like everything is in these religious terms and like, oh, we don't know what this thing is and we think it's evil, so it must be hell.
Yeah, and there's kind of this talk of like, yeah, there's other dimensions that are all fire and blah blah blah, but they're not hell. And then, okay, this one is just what the okay. I find depictions of hell generally really, they play for bringing in text that the book isn't, and therefore can mean a lot of different things depending on the reader that aren't necessarily related to the book at all. And so that gives different interpretations, and it's also just kind of hacky and cheap.
You know, all you need to defeat the devil is to punch him really hard.
You punch him in the nose like he's a shark.
Yeah. Yeah. And then teamwork, you know, Devil Hulk and Absorbing Man, they just team up and take on the, you know, Devil Dad. And, you know, it's just like, yeah, exactly. It's like, you know.
It's like if Jack Chick wrote Marvel Comics. I hate it.
Yeah, and I would have been more on board if it was like, we're in an extra dimension that's kind of like hell, but is not. And like, it's just like, why is it all like ruined buildings? Why are they sprawling through a post-apocalyptic landscape? I don't understand why that exists.
Was that calling back to his childhood when he was knocking down the little city that he built? Was that supposed to be like his subconscious as hell, maybe?
But then McGee's dad shows up, so it's like her version of hell as well. It's like,
maybe it was Rick like Jones. A certain point of their subconscious just meeting all at once.
But I think there's calling it hell is like a lot of assumption on the part of the characters. Like, I don't think they know for sure.
The narrator, I think, explicitly called it hell.
The book is called Hulk in Hell, so.
Well, I wouldn't sign on to that notion that it's hell, actually. So
I mean, there are like 20 other versions of hell in the Marvel universe too. So
I'm gonna go with Hint Master Deluxe on that one.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but like, there's, yeah, I can appreciate that. It's very extra character labeled as hell though, so it feels a little cheap to have the narrator say it's hell and to have the book say it's hell and have the title say it's hell and then have it not be hell. But that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, what if the real hell is just inside us, man?
It was inside us all along.
Well, one of the quotes isn't it like hell is just the absence of love?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Isn't it strange that we leave with him calling Jennifer Connelly?
Oh, not Liv Tyler. And with that, I think we should come back to the scoring thing to wrap things up. Jolie, you're first on my screen, so I think you should go first.
Okay, I initially gave it a 7.8. I will, because I gave it some room to grow, I will give it an 8.2. It made me think a lot more about the story or the stories that I read, and speaking and asking questions of everybody really cleared up a lot of plot points for me. And not just because a friend is doing art for the book, but I honestly am so like happy to have found finally like a Marvel book that I really enjoy that isn't just trite. It's really good. And like in like a hero like a horror comic, like the kind of genre that I like, being mixed with another genre that I've wanted to like for years now, or I've been trying to find more connections to, and it's like it's kind of nice. So 8.2.
I must say I'm intrigued by how like specific you are with your rating. That you're in like 0.2 territory.
You have to give it room.
Fair.
Let it breathe.
Yeah, but heavy breathing, heavy labored breathing. I guess. Okay, I will pick the Corn Squad to give their final assessments and numbers.
The tribunal.
Oh.
I'll raise it up. I was at a 7. I'll give it a 7.322. 9725.
Okay, so that's later.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we talked about my favorite parts of the book. We kind of skipped over, the weaker part. We touched a little bit on, but I think it was kind of seesaw. I felt like some parts were really strong and some parts I was like, well, I could have skipped that. But I really appreciated the discussion and kind of I don't know what other people saw of it, because I do think June said we all bring our own version of this to these version of hell, and so I feel like seeing what we were all thinking that the final arc I think was helpful.
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with my original scoring. 8 for the story, 6 for the art. I really wish there was a McGee one shot. That would have been really great. Because it bums me out now. maybe later in the future she'll get her time to shine if I just wish hard enough. I don't know. Who knows?
You have to clap.
Please clap.
So, stranger things have happened. So maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that's it. Oliver?
Yes, the council shall decide this book's fate. So it's still an 8 for me. I think it might be higher if it had explored some of its themes in a little bit more detail than it did. But I thought it was really good. I thought it was really doing some unique and interesting things with the character. So I enjoyed my time with it. How about Carlos?
I am between keeping it at an 8 and dropping it down to a 7.5. I did really like it. I did really like it, and I still really like it. I think there are parts of it that sort of come with being a Marvel book and sort of come with being a serialized book that it is assumed that will go on forever, or that's how its owners approach it. And sort of, part of it is picking up storylines and sort of dropping them when it doesn't fit anymore. And some of the hackier elements, but it is I don't know. It's one of the best cosmic horror stories, and also just deeply, I don't know, almost decontextualizing of a very familiar character that I've read in a while, and I really appreciate that. I talked myself into keeping it at an 8.
The deconstructionist Hulk.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
Let's go with Mike Pratt.
I'm going to keep it as an 8. I think the only thing that can make this better is if they made it into a movie, and it was directed by Del Toro.
Ooh.
The guy who directed Hellboy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he would be able to pull it off. And if I watched that movie in a theater, which I fantasize about now these days, I also think that if I watched that movie, I would not be able to sleep probably for a week. Because it would be just so visually disturbing. So
Cronenberg Hulk would also be amazing.
Oh yeah, that would be good too. That would be excellent.
Oh, the scene.
I'm going to go with June.
All right. I would like to give reading single issue comics in 12 to 15 issue arcs in 11 because that was great. And I wish we would never do 4 arc stories again. I give the discussion a great. And the book, I gave it a 6. The discussion really kind of reaffirmed some of my problems with it and gave me new insight into kind of the way that some of the problems might be resolved. Thank you, Patrick. Sorry, I have a very energetic puppy in my lap. And say hi, Rooney.
Hey, that dog tax.
Dog tax.
Yeah,
Oh,
show more dog.
Okay. Well, my face.
How dare you have a dog this whole time and not let us know?
It was outside on a walk. So I'm gonna. My feelings in the book were like both up and down. So I gave it a 6, and I'm gonna come back to a 6.1 repeating, just to get really obnoxious. That's it.
I don't know whether to take offense to that or more offense to that or Keith's.
Keith's.
Always Keith's.
Yeah.
Okay, who do you pick?
Oh, sorry, I'm on my phone. Who's left? Patrick, we have to save you for last, right? Sean?
Yeah, I'll stick with an 8. I enjoyed it. I've never read The Hulk before, but it was interesting. Yeah. Pat?
Alex should go first.
Alex.
Oh, Alex.
All right. Yeah, I'll keep mine on the 9. Definitely my favorite Hulk story, and I would recommend reading the rest of the series too if you're interested. It gets better.
Ooh.
Pat, I think is that.
Yeah, I'll stay with my 8.5. I really enjoyed this book. Because it really surprised me about the character. And I just love Al Ewing's writing. I follow all the titles that he's writing now. And it's made me interested in the character more, which is always what I look for in the book. So next month, assuming we're still alive and sane, we are appropriately reading a Junji Ito book, Uzumaki, which sounds like a noodle dish, but it's probably not.
It means
Oliver,
spiral.
This means spiral.
would you?
Yeah.
Oh, so like a noodle
Yeah.
You could probably get
situation?
So fish cakes that come with
It's usually
sushi.
with ramen or
Yeah, with ramen. I'm sorry.
Oh, right. Yeah. So it is okay. All right. So Oliver, do you want to give us a brief
Yes. So
things to come?
Junji Ito is a very famous Japanese horror manga author. He has written a lot of stuff and has developed, a very stellar reputation for being incredibly fucking horrifying. And so Uzumaki is considered kind of one of his, one of the pinnacles of his work. It's like one of his really iconic books. I've never read it, but I've heard incredibly good things about it. I also felt like it was kind of a little bit outside of the norm of what we usually read here. So I'm really excited for next month's club. I think it'll be good.
I really like
And to, I guess, give you kind of a brief summary of the plot. It's basically in this small Japanese town, there keeps being this recurring pattern of a spiral that keeps appearing in different contexts that don't really make sense, and it just becomes increasingly more bizarre and drives people just increasingly more insane. So I'm excited for it.
Also, Junji Ito, he's actually probably most famous for his brief appearance in Death Stranding.
Does he have an
Was he in Death Stranding? I did not finish that game. I'm sorry. It got too real.
Oh. real.
It got way too real.
Like some secret.
You gotta adjust it a little bit. Oh shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's him.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
I love how he looks like my older brother. Like he just looks like someone's older brother, and then I'm just looking at the images and I'm like ring level scared.
I really think to like ease your fears, you should read his cat manga first, because it's like horror style, but it's like very heartwarming dumb cat stories.
Also,
It's amazing.
And I believe he began as a dentist.
Ooh.
Oh, perfect.
Is that correct?
Humble
If I-
origins.
That's even scary.
I'm not.
Usually I'm pretty bad about making the Zoom meeting, and I'm getting better. I just sent it to Oliver, so the Zoom meeting is already created. So
Okay, cool.
Excellent.
Also, if you want if you want to like dip your toe into Junji Ito, he does have a short story that's like very easy to find online, and you can read it for free. It's called The Enigma of Amigara Faults.
I love it.
And you wanna-
so
Hold on. Sorry, you're gonna have to say that again.
It is called The Enigma of Amigara Fault.
Okay.
I will put it in the book club chat so you can see the title. But yes, The Enigma of Amigara Fault. It's pretty short. You can read it in probably like 5 or 10 minutes. If you want to like dip your toe and get like a little sampler, that's a good way to do it.
is that the one with the holes?
That's the one with the
I
holes.
started that and I never finished it. This is a great way to just spend the 15 to 20 minutes it takes to read it.
And I think he just released a collection of like short stories, which I will read beforehand because I really want to get into this guy.
There's
I know a lot of people who love him.
of short stories he's done. Another one of his more famous kind of characters is Tommy, who has a bunch of little short stories related to her and her being super creepy and kind of ring-like. So that's also another thing you could explore. Like there's just so much stuff. Like, because I'll think I'm all caught up, and I'm like, oh no, I didn't read all of these things. So he has a ton of stuff. I haven't read his Frankenstein adaptation yet.
I didn't know he had a Frankenstein.
That came out not terribly long ago.
But yeah, he's very Lovecraftian, which is a good follow-up to this one. But what is this? Uzumaki. It was actually in like a published serially in a magazine for teenagers, so it's not the scariest. I mean, like I know we've read some really gruesome comics for Halloween in the past, and this one is not as bad.
Yeah,
So
it's very much like scary stories to tell in the dark, kind of scary. Like the drawings are the most horrifying part, honestly.
So it's scary.
Yes, what
that
you're
gives me-
saying. Yeah.
That gives me no confidence in the level of scare.
Yes.
Okay, so
Well, then read the cat horror thing, and maybe you'll be like, "Oh, he's just a weird cat man."
just so that I can stop recording, I'm just gonna. Can I get Patrick? Can I get you to say? So that was.
So that was the Immortal Hulk. Thank you for coming and chatting with us, everybody. Yay!